Hello and welcome to LuraTech's webinar on DocYard, our new software product. I apologize for the little delay. We had to wait for a few more attendees who now have arrived, so we can start right now. Let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Armin Ortmann, as written down here. I am the CTO, the head of the development department of LuraTech. There is a second name on this presentation, Mr. Carsten Heiermann, who is our CEO. Unfortunately, he has an urgent business appointment today and cannot join us here in this pre-arranged webinar. I apologize for that, and therefore I will be your host alone today for this webinar. A few more technicalities. We have timed this webinar to last for 45 minutes. I will try to stick to the schedule regardless of the delay in beginning. Of course, it is not so easy to conduct such a webinar with questions by the audience. You may have seen in the GoToMeeting software that you have a text box to enter questions, and I encourage you to do so. As I'm here alone, I will certainly not be able to directly type an answer to every question, but of course we encourage you to ask your questions, and we will respond later via email such that no question shall remain unanswered. And for the questions that I see and I can simply answer in the context of my presentation, I will certainly do so. Also, we will show a questionnaire at the end of the webinar, and we ask you to be so kind as to fill out this questionnaire and give us some feedback concerning the quality and the contents of the webinar and whether that met your expectations or whether there is anything we might improve. Also, just to mention it, we will have 2 follow-up webinars going more into the details of DocYard. I'll mention that again towards the end of this webinar and show you the dates and where to register for these in-detail webinars. Okay, let's start right away. LuraTech and DocYard. What is this new product? You may have heard from our press releases or on some trade show or by one of our sales or marketing people that we have this new huge product released now, and the question is, what is it? What is it good for? That's what this webinar will try to address. So we'll talk about features and benefits. We'll introduce the software components that pertain to this software platform, as we call it. We'll have a short software demonstration, and we'll then go into further details such as installation requirements and the various products that we intend to sell in the scope of this DocYard platform. And finally, just a very quick glance as to who we see as the target market for this platform. Okay, the platform itself is certainly concerned with document conversion. That's the domain that LuraTech has dedicated its products to, and we intend to follow up with this new product. So while the platform in general might be useful for different application domains, we will certainly try to address the market of document conversion and really of mass document conversion in production workflow environments. So it's not a product for you to use at home or on your desktop PC, but rather in the server environment in companies that are concerned with conversion of massive amounts of documents. It is also an integration platform. We'll soon go into details, and it has a modular architecture. That is certainly something to note. And we do provide thorough support of distributed and parallel processing, and still we offer a centralized setup, configuration, monitoring, and reporting. All of that will be explained in more detail in the next slides. Let us start out small. Let's start with a very simple use case that you may have when converting documents. Actually, LuraTech sells several software products aiming at exactly that use case, which is taking scanned images, say in TIFF format, and converting them efficiently to PDFs, maybe even PDF-A for archival. And of course, we're not the only player in this area, and there exist a bunch of, a multitude of software products that let you do that. So you may, in your workspace, you may have set up such a product, and you have a workflow, but this workflow you find out is kind of hardwired. So if you have one tiny thing to add, and we've just put this contrast normalization here as a placeholder. It could be anything else. It could be despeckling. It could be cropping. It could be any kind of image manipulation that may be useful, because the scanned images you have here just for some reason don't exactly match the requirements that you have concerning the output. Okay, and as soon as you have this one request that isn't really covered by everything that this product may already offer, you are in a bind, because all you can do then is either contact the vendor and let them engineer a new version of the product. That may be possible. Then again, if the vendor, say, is Adobe or Microsoft or Apple, they may not necessarily do that rather soon. And so what you are usually constrained to is to add this extra step somewhere before or after that product, and somehow do manual copying, devise a script or whatever to tie the two things together. What do we offer in the scope of DocYard? Well, it's basically spelled out here. Instead of adding scripted or manual steps, DocYard offers modular building blocks, and the modular building blocks, as outlined here, make it much easier to splice in some extra processing step. So let's take a look at this diagram for a second. The actual conversion, as would be done or could be accomplished with the LuraTech MRC compression, which is also part of our PDF compressor product, that would only be one module here, and other steps such as reading the file and writing the result and converting the input to bitmap images would be individual modular steps. So we have a few more points where we could simply fit in such a normalization, or, as I said, any other kind of imaging tool that would basically improve the quality of your documents. And still, you wouldn't have to do that for all of your workflows. For all the workflows where the standard conversion is totally sufficient, you wouldn't have to use that module. You would use it only in those cases where you would need that functionality, and if it's something else that you need to do, say deskewing or despeckling or whatever, all of that could be done here, and even these individual steps could again be combined by expanding this workflow further. Okay? And another issue already mentioned is it's called network computing here. It's actually really parallel processing support. So that's a case that we see rather often. A user buys one of our products, say, or some other product, and it can process a certain amount of documents on one machine or even on one processor core. But then due to the successful processing, you get more business, more documents come in, you need to expand. And at that point, you basically have the choice of installing the product on several machines, or buying a more powerful machine. But basically, at some point, you'll always be forced to resort to the processing power of several computers. And on the other hand, we see that not even all software supports multi-threading, i.e., not all software is already able to use all the processor cores of one multi-core server, let alone to parallelize the processing effort efficiently and consistently over several machines. And that is one of the key features of DocYard. The infrastructure of the DocYard platform helps you to do this in an automated fashion. So you don't have to worry about how many processor cores or where the processor cores are and how they interact, but the platform will support you in doing that, which basically results in this scenario. You have one centralized, we call it cockpit. It is shown here as this operator with his console. You have one central point where you can control several machines, assuming that the DocYard software is installed on these machines. And what you do is you specify the tasks, you send out the workflows. The platform itself will make sure that the data is passed along as required between the several machines. And what comes back to the operator is a unified monitoring and the reports of the processing. Okay, so you are basically relieved, and actually even the DocYard modules to a large degree are relieved from being concerned with parallelization issues and with concurrency, multi-threading, and whatnot. Another benefit, extensibility. You've seen these little module icons, and of course a lot of platforms have such a design, have building blocks that are modular, and still you are constricted, you are restrained to the building blocks that one vendor or a vendor and his partners provide you with, and so there is not so much benefit as opposed to the scenario shown in the first slide. You can now introduce additional steps as additional modules, but where do you get those modules if you don't want to write them yourself? Well, actually with DocYard you can write them yourself. That is, we publish a module API, which is the exact interface that LuraTech itself also uses to develop such modules. And this exact interface is available as a product, and it's available to customers if they require it, but we'll also make this available to third parties who can then develop custom modules and act as resellers or act as service providers who sell DocYard with add-ons to the actual end customers. So we intend this and we market this as really a very flexible and open platform where everybody can really develop custom modules to their specific needs. And maybe we don't even grasp what it is that these modules do. And that brings us to another point. We have this really well-structured programming interface that defines what a module looks like from the outside. So it defines what input a module can accept and what output a module can write, and the general shape, the way it plugs into our platform. But we are really not very much concerned with what's going on inside a module. Of course we are if we're talking about our own modules that we develop, but if there is something you need to do inside a module, you have a great degree of freedom, which is, for example, outlined here by saying if you need a module that does OCR, it's not really important whether you use OCR Toolkit A or OCR Toolkit B to actually really do the text recognition on the pages that go through such a module. And we, as LuraTech, as the platform provider, care the least, actually. So this gives you the freedom on the inside of a module where the actual work is done, where images are processed, where text is recognized, where metadata is inserted. All these functional tasks that happen inside a module can be done by a wide variety of software, such as, for example, SDKs, such as standalone applications. It could even be scripts, or you can even contact a web service. Whatever it is you need and whatever you already have in place and don't want to replace when introducing DocYard can be the actual inside of a module, can be the functionality that a module performs or the function that it executes. And that directly brings us to the next step. What about manual tasks? We've seen a few things. They all look like they're fully automated. That is fine and well. But then you have these few workflows which are, for example, unnecessarily manual, but which cannot really be performed without manual supervision here and there. The classic example being quality control. If it is required that an operator check the results or even check a random sample of the results that you generate, you cannot automate that. You cannot just simply let a computer do that and say these files have been checked, have been digitally signed by a human. It just doesn't work that way. So again, saying that basically what happens inside a module is not really our concern. That directly leads us to the point, well, of course, you can have a module where the actual task is performed, or at least performed to a certain degree, by a human. So you have the chance to integrate individual interactive steps into such automated workflows just as well. And just saying, well, you can do that, of course, isn't really to the point, but we actually offer support. We directly offer module classes in the API that offer support for adding GUI elements for interactive processing of data. So what you end up with is a toolkit that supports fully automated tasks. It supports combinations of automated and manual tasks, and it supports fully interactive tasks. And another benefit, of course, since the platform itself keeps track of what goes where, which objects are passed along these channels, and therefore which objects are manually edited here, that of course ends up in the performance data that DocYard captures, and therefore can be part of reporting later on. Another benefit, or another angle at the benefits of DocYard, it really is an integration platform. So we've seen several things, or different things can go inside a module and can therefore become part of a workflow. You do not necessarily have to throw out all the tools that you have, but you can leverage them and reuse them as DocYard modules. And therefore, if you have such a workflow, this is the other way around. Here PDFs come in and they're rastered in Acrobat and they're post-processed with Ortmann view. That's actually, once again, just a tiny example, but it really is a real-world example taken from one of our customers. You don't necessarily have to replace everything with DocYard modules, but even if you wrap some of the things that you want to reuse here with DocYard modules, what you get is the unified approach of the DocYard platform, and therefore the way that parallelization support is offered, the way that data is passed efficiently from one stage to the next, and the way that performance data is captured and kept ready for report generation later on. This all is unified, and that's one of the great benefits. You can leverage your existing software, but you can get rid of the cumbersome manual copying, the cumbersome script editing, all the tiny little steps that make up these real-world workflows today, and that are, if not error-prone, then at least inefficient to some degree. Final benefit. Oh, and I must apologize. A German slide slipped into my English presentation at this point. I'll try to cover that up by explaining it in English what we were trying to describe here. A thing you can certainly do is you can start out small. We of course intend to sell this and sell this on a huge scale, but you don't have to do the complete buy-in up front. You don't have to remodel, reshape all the workflows in your department, in your company, and invest a huge amount into basically the risk of a total conversion. What we instead offer is starting out small, starting with one of the workflows you have seen here before, a workflow covering only a few processing steps in one of the easier conversions that you may have in your enterprise, and then to continue to integrate further steps until you arrive at a more complicated scenario, until you have integrated more of the work that you do into one or more workflows. And that's what this workflow drawing or this workflow diagram shows us. It shows us still the components of this original MRC workflow, but other things have been added, and some of these things, such as an OCR module, are currently actively being developed by us. Some other things could be developed by third-party vendors. And for example, this workflow would allow captured material to flow in via this path, and materials taken from a file system because they've been captured before or elsewhere via this path, and they would take unified way through the system, be finally formatted as PDF and exported. So this would be a more complicated workflow, and it could even become more complicated, more evolved than this. So to sum up, oh, thank God it's English again, so I don't have to improvise. To sum up, we've seen these points before: document conversion in production workflow environments, integration, platform, modular architecture, distributed processing, centralized setup. That's something we'll also see in the software presentation. And what we also have is effective integration of human interaction with automated processing steps, and that is done via the customizable and extensible API, the module API that we sell as a separate product, as we have seen. Before we get to the presentation, one more thing to mention. I've just talked about the DocYard platform a lot, about a DocYard installation. Let me just clarify. A DocYard installation is DocYard software running on several network computers, and the actual components that run on these computers are, of course, modules. These are the actual functional components. That's where stuff happens. That's where the work gets done. The platform itself is rather really like the infrastructure. It's like the street layout. It's like the piping in an industrial plant. It's where things get moved along, get forwarded, but the platform itself is rather unaware of what the contents actually are, and it therefore never does anything to those contents. Whatever you do in terms of image or document processing, what really happens inside the modules. To make these modules work on the several computers concerned, we have the so-called module managers, and we have one module manager per physical or virtual machine. This kind of hinting at the fact that we are totally fine with virtualization, with virtual machines. We actually really use them a lot in testing during our development, and therefore for DocYard it's not really important or decisive whether something runs on a physical PC or on a virtual machine, possibly sharing hardware with other virtual computers. The module manager is permanently running on the service, and it's really the host for the modules, i.e. the module manager loads and unloads the modules and connects them with these connections that we saw as required for performing the work. And the module managers in turn are kind of controlled and conducted by this master instance. So within one DocYard installation, you have one master and you have one database component, and the database is actually where the configuration and the reporting data go, and the master and the module managers therefore interact with this database. And the cockpit, this is what we will see and mainly see in the software demonstration. That's the GUI application, the user interface for controlling and monitoring what is going on. As a diagram, this can look like this diagram here. You have the network, you have 4 of these big boxes symbolizing server computers, and you have one desktop machine. The desktop machine in this case runs the cockpit. 3 of the servers run one module manager each, hosting different modules. And you have on a different server, you have the master and database applications or services. This could also look different. In the minimal scenario, as I use it for the demonstration, which is up right now, everything, all the components here run on one and the same machine. But of course, the master and database could be on the same machine as the cockpit, or they could even be distributed to individual machines each. That is not really, so this is just one example of how to map the infrastructure to a certain network topology, but it's not really restricted. The only thing is that none of the modules is ever really able to run without a module manager. So these are not really standalone programs, but they are rather components that get loaded on demand and then can also be unloaded. Okay, software demonstration. Just a second. I must admit I have to go to a different machine to be able to efficiently demonstrate this. So I hope there's no delay with this remote desktop. I already have one master and 2 module managers running here in the background, and I'm now starting the cockpit. And the next thing you see is that the cockpit connects the master. You see a few logging messages here, and you also see 2 module managers with these fancy names, and what you also see is that they're basically idle right now. What else do you see in this cockpit application? Well, we do have a collection of modules up here. That's the modules that we have on this demonstration machine right now. And of course, as I said, we are presently working hard to further expand this set of modules. To create a workflow from such modules, you can simply just say new workflow. You can go over here and simply drag and drop things into this workflow diagram, and you can then interactively wire these connectors. Okay, you can drag them around. You can also automatically layout. I won't demonstrate all of that right here. Let's just go to one of the prefabricated workflows, and that's really this very simple MRC compression workflow I had on the presentation slides before. So what you see here is a list of workflows that are already in my system that I have prepared beforehand. And you see there are also more complicated ones, such as this one, or this one, which involves an interactive module. These may be part of the follow-up webinars where we go more into the technical details of DocYard. For brevity, I'll stick to this one for the moment. And one thing you also have seen while I did select individual modules, you see module properties displayed down here. So for this input module, you see an input path, you see file types it can import. You can toggle whether it imports the contents of subdirectories, and so on and so forth. Same for other modules here. The read image is just straightforward. It doesn't have any configuration. What you also see is a short description. So whenever you select a module, you'll see a short description of what it does, and that also gives you an idea of what the things are good for, but of course there's also a real documentation telling you how to use, how to employ these modules, because of course there is a little more to them than just simply drawing connections here in the diagram. Okay, so fine and well. I do have a workflow here. I have specified where it would read its data, where it would write its output. What do I do with it now? Well, it's just about as simply as pushing the play button. If I have a module with sufficiently edited properties, I can simply start this as a so-called job. So when we were talking about workflows all the time, this is really twofold. You have the workflows here, which are kind of the abstract concept of what to do, the recipe, and then you can really start and fire up the stove and get things cooking, and that's what I just did. And the immediate change that you can perceive is that this list of jobs, which before only listed archived jobs, i.e. jobs that ran on this machine before, it now lists this job as active, and the monitoring already shows you that some things are going on, and that, for example, the MRC compression has already finished with 8 files, and the export has also finished for them, but some more are pending from the import. And it also shows you that all of this is happening on the Juliet module manager, whereas the Romeo module manager is still idle. That is because I did not specify any further options when running this workflow. And what the system then does is just basically instantiate each of these modules once on one module manager. You can go here and you can tell it more explicitly where to put everything and whether a module should exist several times in parallel. I just didn't do that right now, and for of course the most efficient layout is if it just runs everything on one machine. So in this demonstration case, you can now directly see that these output files are written here to this sample output, and this looks like it's done right. So that brings us to the next topic. What's these archive jobs list good for? Well, you can go back and see what happened before and how long it took and where it went. So that is a test I ran this morning, and it took about an hour and 30 minutes to finish some 1,600 files. That's what I see. And I also can inspect which settings were used here. So whenever a job is completed, the data is not lost, but is preserved in the database, and you can inspect it later on, which also brings you to the point that if you say, yeah, that's good, but I deleted that workflow from my list of templates up here, you can go back and say, create a new workflow from that job, and that gives you the chance to start the same thing again, or just to modify a very few things and start over again. Something I cannot really demonstrate here, also due to a lack of time. I must also refer you to the upcoming detail webinars. All of this really ends up in a backend database, and this database can be queried using standard database tools such as Microsoft Access or Crystal reports. We really use the most straightforward ODBC structures to access this database ourselves, and therefore it is really straightforward to draw reports from this database and really create nice and viewable and printable reporting documents from the data that is written as protocol of such workflows. I guess that's about it. Of course, you can maybe just as a last little demonstration, you can, of course, I've told this one here to override its results, so I can just start it again. And of course, it's not a problem to use a different workflow and to start it again and start it too in parallel. Since all of this runs on the same machine, this will take a second until it displays. Okay, there we go. I hope you can all see this sufficiently well. Okay, so now you see the second workflow, and you see that the system was clever enough to put the second workflow on the Romeo module manager, as it realized that Juliet is already running one workflow, and so these two now both process in parallel. And again, this is all running on one machine right now, so it may become a little slow, but you basically see what is going on. Okay, and I can of course go and also abort these jobs, which I will now do to end this demo. Okay. Back to the presentation. A few final things to mention. We did see the software structure. We did see what the cockpit application looks like, how workflows are instantiated. I can, of course, not show you at this point what the module API looks like and how it is to write modules. All I can tell you is that quite some of the modules that you saw, which use, for example, our MRC compression SDK in the background, they get along well with a few hundred lines of code. So it's really not too much to say that writing a module can be pretty straightforward. Of course, if a module does more evolved things and you don't rely on an SDK or a library or a service in the background, but write everything directly in the context of this DocYard module, things may become a little more complicated, but the basic requirements of creating such a module and interfacing with the infrastructure can really be achieved with a few hundred lines of code. The installation environment, that's of course a question that comes up. What kind of operation system did we write this for? Well, the answer is pretty easy. We definitely heavily rely on Microsoft.NET technology, so this runs on Windows, full stop. Mono is certainly not evolved enough at this point to really cover what we need. We need things from .NET 3.5, which is state-of-the-art and runs on everything starting with Windows XP and Windows Server 2003, which certainly are fine operating system to work with. And of course, everything newer, such as Server 2008 or Windows Vista or Windows 7, are supported as well. As I already mentioned, within a module, we offer support to seamlessly integrate native components, i.e. components which were not developed with .NET technology but predate this technology. They may be native Windows components written in C, C++, and actually the MRC compression you just saw does exactly that. It uses our existing C, C++ compression SDK, and it interfaces with the DocYard.NET structure just fine. And so we really need this also to leverage our own components onto this new level. Basically, you can even write a complete module in C, C++ using some .NET COM mapping technologies, but that's just about all I can say here. And we really recommend writing modules in .NET, and our experience is that a skilled programmer is able to do so in a very short time. Basically, we're really talking about days here, not weeks or months. Another question that is asked a lot is, So does this use service-oriented architecture? Does it use SOAP as a protocol? In itself, currently, it does not. We are using a technology which is called Communication Foundation, WCF, in the .NET technology, and that provides for SOA and SOAP communication protocols. So if we have the challenge to interface with something running on a Unix machine or something running in a Java environment or something basically being a web service, we could switch internally to that communication protocol. But amongst our own components, we use basically more efficient protocols. When you think about transmission of, say, a 30 megabyte image or document across a network, you would not necessarily want to transmit this via SOAP, but you can use more efficient binary transmission protocols which are closer to the actual TCP IP layer. And that's what we do presently. But we certainly have the chance to alter that should the necessity arise. Also concerning the database, I already mentioned that we're using really middle-of-the-road standard SQL ODBC database communication. We are shipping as a default with Postgres SQL as a database. That's basically the most powerful, freely available SQL database, and we found that for our purposes, and especially for test and evaluation purposes with DocYard, it works just fine. If in your enterprise you have a different SQL database at hand, such as MS SQL or Oracle or DB2 or Informix or whatever, of course we can set it up to work with this database and to use it as its backend storage, and therefore, for example, be tied into your backup schedule. So I must rush a bit. I see we are approaching the 45 minutes, and therefore let me sum up with the last two slides. DocYard products. Things we intend to sell and market. The platform itself is the general processing infrastructure. It's really this conglomerate of cockpit, master, database, and module managers, and of course basic modules such as the file system input and output that you saw. We don't want everyone really to write these and reinvent the wheel again on their own. And I must really emphasize that several license models are available here. So if you are interested, our sales personnel will certainly be able to provide you with a licensing scheme that really matches your real-world usage scenario. So there are unlimited schemas, but there are also licensing models which really work more like the electricity model, where you pay a minimum fee for general availability and then really pay for what you consume, i.e. for the number of documents or the number of megabytes that you really process. The DocYard software development kit is really centered around the module API. Of course, it comes with documentation, samples, etc., etc. And that is really an additional product. So you don't directly buy this along with the software, with the platform itself, but it is an add-on in case you are interested in developing modules on your own. We will, of course, continue to develop modules, and these will be sold individually or bundled as packages or bundles for, say, specific tasks or specific application domains. This final slide is concerned with the target market. We really intend to market DocYard to mid-sized and large scan service bureaus, as well as middle to large-sized corporations who have requirements concerning the massive conversion of documents, such as, I don't know, banks, insurances, basically everyone, for example, who is moving towards this digital mailroom scenario. those would be customers for DocYard. And of course, we're absolutely open to partner with development partners, with service providers, with value-added resellers who can customize the DocYard platform and supply it to their end customers. Okay, I'm a bit over time. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. We will, of course, try to answer all the questions that have been unanswered, have remained unanswered via email. Of course, feel free to contact us if something comes up later on, or if you want to test the software or need further information. And once again, I like to point you towards the follow-up webinars with further information. You can hopefully see this here. Right, the dates are on our web server, and of course you can still sign up for them. We will provide a recording of this presentation online, and if you require further information material, or if you want to see the presentation slides again, of course you are welcome. Just let us know, or just check our web server. And I can only ask you to fill out the questionnaire which will come up once we end this webinar. Let us know what you think. Let us know what we could improve. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful afternoon or day or morning wherever you are. Thank you.